Sold, to the man whose wife is sleeping with the seller. That wasn't a joke. It wasn't a mic drop line from a movie. It was me standing in front of a stunned crowd of 80 Southern townsfolk, clutching a microphone in one hand and my dignity in the other. But we're not there yet. Let me show you what led up to that moment. Because no one sets out to burn down their own life, not without a reason. My name's Simon Travis. I've been an estate appraiser and licensed auctioneer for the past 12 years. I travel across Georgia and the Carolinas, helping families settle what's left behind after death, debt, divorce. I walk into homes where grief still lives in the carpet, where arguments linger in the air like mildew, where secrets collect dust on attic shelves. It's a strange job, and an isolating one. I've auctioned off $100,000 coin collections, Civil War uniforms, even a vintage hearse once. You learn to keep your distance. Emotions aren't good for business. I thought I was good at reading people. I was wrong. I met Caroline at a lakefront auction in Macon. She worked as a freelance antiques cataloger, the kind of woman who could tell you the value of a pewter sugar bowl just by the tarnish. Blonde, precise, never late. We dated 6 months, married after 11. Our life was always in motion town to town, estate to estate. She handled photography and item descriptions for my higher-end clients. I handled the bids, the haggling, the final hammer strike. We were a good team. For a while. But things changed last fall. She started turning down trips. Started staying behind to catch up on inventory. Started texting at odd hours, stepping outside to take supplier calls in the cold. I didn't question it, not at first. We were both tired, both burned out from travel and deadlines. But what I chalked up to professional distance turned out to be something else entirely. The call that started it all came in February. A dusty voicemail from a man named Arthur Hennings, just outside Greensville. His father had passed, leaving behind a farmhouse full of vintage tools, Civil War letters, and 2 barns worth of miscellaneous junk. Arthur needed someone to appraise, catalog, and auction the entire estate. He wanted it done fast. Normally, I'd bring Caroline. She had a sharp eye for mid-century furniture, and Arthur said the house had some Eames-looking pieces that might be real. But when I asked her to come, she hesitated. I've got that back inventory from the Dalton job to finish, she said, not looking up from her laptop. You mean the job from 3 weeks ago? I asked. She shrugged. Just go. It's 3 days, right? I told myself not to overthink it. Not to notice how quickly she returned to typing, how she smiled at her phone when she thought I wasn't looking. I kissed her forehead before I left. She didn't kiss back. Greensville is a one-gas station kind of town, the sort of place where people still leave their doors unlocked, and everybody knows everybody. The Hennings property sat on 6 acres of rolling land and pine trees, with the main house half sunk into the earth from age. Arthur met me out front, mid-40s, wiry, with a permanent 5 o'clock shadow and a limp that didn't match his easy charm. I appreciate you coming so quick, he said, gripping my hand hard. My dad, he was a collector, but he didn't always know what he had. We walked the property, took inventory, and I made notes for the online listings. I spotted a few rare finds, a mint-condition Lionel train set, an autographed Hank Aaron ball, even a pair of antique dental chairs that still gave me the creeps. We talked logistics, pricing, the crowd size we could expect. Arthur seemed polite, eager to impress, maybe too eager. He smiled a little too long when I mentioned I'd be staying at the only inn in town. Hope you don't mind rust and biscuits for breakfast, he joked. Our fancy days are long gone. I laughed, made small talk. Didn't think much of it. That was my mistake. I spent 2 days cataloging every item in the house, and by the 3rd morning, I was ready to finalize the layout for the auction. Caroline hadn't returned my calls the night before, just a text that said, busy. Everything okay? Something about the phrasing nagged at me. I called again that morning, straight to voicemail. So I texted her. No answer. Then, on impulse, I logged into our shared auction email, the one she handled. She wasn't tech-savvy and rarely remembered to log out when she used my laptop. Sure enough, her inbox was still synced. And that's when I saw it. A long thread of emails between Caroline and Arthur.H, going back 3 months. The subject line started innocuous, Hennings estate dates, but slowly shifted. That night, can't stop thinking about you. When will you tell him? My hand froze on the trackpad. The most recent message was from Caroline. Subject, can't wait to see you again. Body, Simon leaves tomorrow. I'll meet you Friday night, same place as last time. Don't do anything stupid. I stared at the screen until my vision blurred. My lungs forgot how to breathe. They didn't just know each other. They were planning this, laughing behind my back while I cataloged a dead man's memories. When I finally looked up, the window showed Arthur walking toward the barn, slow, relaxed, like a man with nothing to hide. I watched him for a long time, hatred growing slow and silent in my throat. I didn't confront him. Not yet. I spent the rest of the day going through the motions, organizing folding chairs, marking auction lots, setting up the PA system. But in my head, I was unraveling. Every laugh Caroline gave me felt false in retrospect. Every late night on the phone, every business trip she refused, every slow pull away from my touch. And Arthur? That son of a bitch had smiled at me, shook my hand, let me into his father's home like we were friends. I wanted to scream. Instead, I made a decision. If they wanted to play silent, fine. But I'd speak, in the only language people like them understand. Public spectacle. The auction was scheduled for Saturday morning. By Friday night, the crowd had already started to gather, folks driving in from neighboring towns, antique dealers sniffing for treasure, local gossipers hoping for drama. I drove into town, parked behind the inn, and waited. At 9:47 p.m., I watched Caroline's silver Honda pull into the Hennings driveway. She got out, wearing the red coat I gave her last Christmas. Her hair was curled, lipstick too red for an ordinary visit. She walked inside without knocking. It took everything I had not to march across that field and smash the door down. But I didn't. Instead, I pulled out my phone and pressed record. I won't tell you what I saw through the dusty barn window. You already know. But I'll tell you this. They weren't careful. Not even a little. I filmed enough. Enough for the court of small-town opinion. Enough to light the match. The next morning, I wore my best auctioneer's jacket. Dark blue. Brass buttons. I shaved clean, combed my hair, drank black coffee on an empty stomach. People were seated in lawn chairs by 9 a.m. sharp. The sun was out. The field buzzed with excitement. Caroline stood at the edge of the crowd, clipboard in hand, pretending to be professional. Arthur stood near the front, nodding to buyers, looking every bit the helpful host. I didn't look at them. Not yet. I opened the auction with a warm joke about rust and ghosts. Got some laughs. Rolled into the first 10 lots like nothing was wrong. A Civil War saber went for $800. A vintage Coca-Cola sign hit $1,200. The bidders were hot. The money was flowing. Then came the vintage record player, a cherrywood Magnavox in perfect working condition. I teased it up, made the crowd eager. Opening bid at $200. Do I hear $250? Hands shot up. Arthur raised his own hand casually. I paused, smiled. $250 to the man whose wife is sleeping with the seller. The microphone squealed slightly from the sudden silence. People turned. Caroline's clipboard hit the grass. Arthur froze mid-bid, jaw slack. I'm sorry, I said, louder now. Let me clarify, the man whose wife has been meeting this charming gentleman at his father's house while pretending to do inventory. Including last night, when she told me she was working late. Dead silence. I have footage, I added, turning to the crowd. In case anyone thinks I'm embellishing. No one moved. No one spoke. Arthur's face went bloodless. Caroline's mouth moved, but no words came. And just like that, the auction was over. The crowd didn't scatter immediately. They just sat there, stuck in that stunned, wide-eyed limbo that only truth can deliver. Not a single folding chair creaked. No whispers. Just the wind rustling through pine trees, while Arthur Hennings stood frozen like a man halfway to a noose. Caroline made the first move. Simon, she said, stepping forward with her arms slightly out like I was a spooked animal. Can we talk? Privately. The crowd leaned in. Some of them were smiling, not kindly. Others looked heartbroken for me. A few looked like they might start clapping. Sure, I said. Let's talk. Why don't you tell them when it started? Don't do this, she hissed. Eyes sharp now, trying to pull me aside. This isn't you. That's where she was wrong. This was exactly me. The me she hadn't bothered to know anymore. The man she'd left out of her plans and emails and hotel room escapades. Arthur finally opened his mouth. You misunderstood. I recorded it. He shut his mouth. That's the thing about liars. They'll spin until the truth walks in with receipts. I walked off the makeshift platform as murmurs rippled through the audience. A few older ladies looked physically ill. The mayor's sister, she handled historical society grants, was shaking her head like someone just pissed on a church pew. A younger couple near the front row actually high-fived. One guy shouted, "Better than NASCAR." Arthur didn't follow me. Neither did Caroline. I passed her on my way to the lot behind the barn, but I didn't look at her. Not directly. She tried to grab my sleeve. I yanked it free without a word. I could feel her panic. Not for me. For her reputation. For the people watching. I drove 20 minutes north to a diner I'd passed on the way in. The kind of place where the waitress has a smoker's voice and a name like Barb stitched on her shirt. I ordered a black coffee and a slice of sour cream pie. I hadn't eaten since the night before. Didn't taste a bite of it. My phone buzzed. I didn't look. Buzzed again. Then rang. Caroline. I hit decline. Then it rang again. Arthur. I hit decline harder. They didn't get to call timeouts anymore. They made their plays. I was simply flipping the scoreboard. When I returned to the inn around 3 p.m., Caroline's car was gone. I half expected her to be in the parking lot waiting, ready with tears or excuses or both. Instead, the innkeeper handed me an envelope. She dropped this off an hour ago, the man said. Didn't say much. Inside was her wedding ring and a yellow legal note in her tight, looping script. Simon, I know you hate me. I don't blame you. But please don't ruin both of us over one mistake. I never meant for it to get this far. It wasn't about love, it was an escape. I'm sorry. Please let this be the end of it. I'll stay away. Just don't make this uglier than it already is. See, I reread it 3 times. Then I lit it on fire in the parking lot trash can and watched the paper curl into ash. That night, I sat on the back porch of the inn, drinking the kind of bourbon that leaves a crater in your chest. There were fireflies out. And crickets. And nothing else. I was calm. Too calm. Because here's the part you're not supposed to say out loud. Hurting someone who hurt you feels good. It doesn't fix you. But for a little while, it gives your broken parts a voice. I didn't just expose them because I was heartbroken. I exposed them because they tried to keep me small. They counted on my silence. They fed off my professionalism and politeness and kept smiling behind their lies. No more. I thought it might blow over quietly. But nothing stays quiet in Greensville. By Sunday morning, a local Facebook group titled The Real Hennings Legacy had over 1,200 members. Someone had filmed the moment at the auction. My mic drop. Caroline's horror. Arthur's stone-faced shock. The video went viral regionally. Thousands of views in a single day. Comments like Southern Soap Opera Live and Justice with a Gavel. The fallout came hard and fast. Arthur Hennings lost 2 pending real estate deals. One buyer backed out mid-sale, citing concerns over character. The local historical society pulled out of the antique preservation grant he'd been angling for. Apparently, they didn't want their name tied to a man who boned the auctioneer's wife in his dead father's barn. Caroline got dropped by her 2 biggest cataloging clients, a luxury antique reseller in Atlanta and a Charleston collector who claimed ethical misalignment. She called me 3 days later from an unknown number. I'm moving out of the apartment, she said flatly. I'll leave my key on the counter. Good, I replied. That's it. What more do you want? She paused. Closure. I laughed. It was quiet and bitter and short. You want closure? Then hear this. You turned our marriage into a clearance bin, and he bought you for a compliment and a farmhouse with termites. Don't call again. I hung up. But anger isn't linear. And revenge isn't clean. That night, after her final call, I found myself looking at old photos, our wedding, our anniversary trip to Asheville, her 30th birthday dinner with the little candle cake. I felt the grief roll in like a slow storm. Not for her, but for the man I used to be with her. The man who trusted her without needing a password. Who thought silence meant peace. I didn't sleep. 2 days later, I got a letter. From Arthur. Mailed. Handwritten. Simon. I won't ask you to forgive me. I knew what I was doing. Caroline told me you 2 were over, said you barely spoke anymore, that the marriage was cold. I believed her. Maybe I wanted to. I didn't mean to humiliate you. That was her life to fix. I was a coward for going along with it. You've got every right to hate me. But I wanted you to know, she cried when she saw what you did at the auction. Not for herself. For you. She said, he never raises his voice. That's how I knew I ruined everything. I don't expect anything from you. I just needed to say it. Arthur. I folded the letter, put it in the same trash can where I'd burned her note. But I didn't light it. Not yet. Because something about that last line stuck to my ribs. He never raises his voice. She was right. I didn't yell. I didn't throw things. I didn't rage. But when I finally spoke, it tore through both of them like wildfire through old timber. That's what betrayal does. It doesn't burn loud. It waits. And then it incinerates. It started with an empty booth at the Rusty Horseshoe Diner. Every Thursday at 8 a.m., Arthur Hennings used to hold court there, black coffee, a sausage biscuit, and 3 retired farmers who'd talk crop yields and town gossip like it was scripture. But the Thursday after the auction, that booth stayed empty. For 3 straight weeks. His name had become a verb in town. "Don't go pulling a Hennings," someone muttered at the feed store when a clerk got caught overcharging a widow. Even people who liked him before now treated him like he'd tracked manure into church. His real estate signs vanished overnight. One woman posted in the local Facebook group, "I'd rather let my house rot than let him list it." I didn't gloat. Not publicly. I didn't like the comments or post cryptic memes or join in the ridicule. But in private, I watched it all unfold like a man standing at the edge of a crater, still holding the detonator. Caroline didn't vanish quite so quietly. She tried to control the story, reached out to mutual contacts, told them we were separated before she met Arthur, that I overreacted, that I ambushed the auction with a highly edited video. She played the victim, painting herself as trapped in a cold marriage to a man who cared more about artifacts than affection. That narrative might have worked, if not for the video. It kept resurfacing. Local blogs reposted it. A podcast called Southern Scandals even featured it in an episode titled Hammer Drop, The Auction Affair. When they reached out for a comment, I sent one line back. Sometimes silence is the loudest sound. It became their episode title, and her undoing. 3 weeks after the auction, I got an email from her mother. Subject, disappointed. Body, Simon. I don't pretend to know what really happened, but airing private grievances in public isn't how decent people handle problems. You humiliated my daughter, and by extension, our entire family. I hope you got whatever satisfaction you were after. We always believed you were the steady one. I suppose everyone has their limits. I read it over coffee, then deleted it. But the phrase stuck. The steady one. Is that all I'd been? The unshakable placeholder? The reliable man she thought would never break character? Because if so, she underestimated the auctioneer. I was booked for another job the following week. A foreclosure estate outside of Charleston, widow passed, kids in Denver, house full of half-packed memories. I debated canceling. My brain was tired. But bills don't wait for heartbreak, and I needed a new routine. Still, something felt different on the drive down. Colder. Like I'd crossed a threshold I couldn't uncross. I used to love the rhythm of the road. The rolling hills, the sleepy diners, the dusty antique shops dotting state highways. But now, everything felt muted. Like color drained from the world and left only function. I pulled into a cheap roadside motel just after dark. Clean, beige, anonymous. I lay on the bed staring at the water-stained ceiling, waiting for sleep that never came. Around 11 p.m., my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I let it ring, then checked the voicemail. It was Arthur. "Simon, I'm not calling to fight. I lost 2 more clients this week. And the bank called. Said if I don't close on something soon, they're pulling the line of credit. I know I did you wrong. I know it. But you've made your point. So I'm asking, no, begging, let this die. Please." I deleted it before he finished. He wasn't begging for forgiveness. He was begging for silence. Too late. The Charleston auction went smooth. Clean estate, polite buyers, a local newspaper that didn't know my story. For the first time in weeks, I felt normal. But when I returned to the motel, there was a woman sitting outside my room. Caroline. In jeans and a loose gray sweater, hair pulled back, eyes rimmed red. "How did you find me?" I asked, weary. "Tracked the event listing. You left your name on the public invoice." I almost laughed. "Forgot how thorough you are when you want something." She stood up. "I'm not here to fight." "Then why?" She hesitated. "Because I can't sleep. Because I keep hearing your voice at the auction every night. And because I miss you." That last part landed like a thud. "You miss me," I repeated deadpan. "Or you miss not being the town pariah?" "Both," she said. And I appreciated the honesty, even if it cut. We talked. For over an hour, under a flickering porch light and the hum of a vending machine. She told me her side, how she felt invisible, how we stopped talking, how the work swallowed us whole, how Arthur made her feel seen. I didn't argue. I just listened. Not because I forgave her, but because I wanted to know the full shape of the wound she left. When she started crying, I didn't comfort her. I didn't reach out. I just let the silence grow heavy between us until she wiped her face and said, "Do you think I'm a monster?" No, I replied. Just selfish. And stupid. She nodded, like she'd been expecting worse. Then she said something that stuck with me. You didn't just ruin us. You ruined you too. And I think you know it. She wasn't wrong. I'd won the public battle. Burned them to the ground with nothing but a microphone and a grudge. But in doing so, I became something colder. Sharper. Less human. Friends I'd known for years distanced themselves. Not because they sided with her, but because they were afraid of what I might do if they ever wronged me. Like I'd become a social executioner. And maybe I had. That realization haunted me. Not regret, not exactly. I meant every second of it. But I started to wonder if there was anything left of the man I'd been before. The next morning, she was gone. No note. No knock. Just her faint perfume in the air and a tiny, crumpled tissue by the plastic chair outside my door. I left Charleston without looking back. Back home, I boxed up the last of her things. Her jewelry box. Her antique guides. The silver hand mirror she bought on our anniversary in Savannah. I didn't burn them. I didn't smash anything. I dropped them off at a Goodwill across town. Let someone else decide their worth now. But the worst came a week later. A call from my mother. Simon, she said gently. Did you really do it? At the auction? All that stuff online. I hesitated. Yes, Mom. I did. She was quiet a long time. Then, I raised you better than that. It felt like a kick in the chest. I know, I whispered. But I wasn't trying to be better. I was trying to be heard. And I think that was the truest thing I'd said in months. The first time someone didn't recognize me was at an estate in Tybee Island. It was a modest job, nautical decor, a few oil paintings, old maps, some furniture a rich nephew didn't want to move. The woman who hired me was in her 60s, polite, distant. When I introduced myself, she blinked and said, Travis. That name sounds familiar. You on the antique circuit? I almost smiled. It had been 6 weeks since the Greensville auction, and finally, the waves seemed to be fading. The viral posts were slowing down. The podcast episode got buried under newer, shinier scandals. For the first time in months, I could walk into a job without being that guy. But anonymity came with a side of hollowness. Because when the chaos ended, so did the sense of purpose. I kept working. I filled my schedule to the brim. 2, sometimes 3 houses a week. I was running from my own silence, chasing a rhythm that wouldn't let the ghosts catch up. But they did. Late at night. In cheap motels and empty apartments, and on long drives down foggy roads. Caroline's words replayed too often. You ruined you too. And maybe that was the part one hadn't fully unpacked yet. Not what she did, but what I'd let it turn me into. I ran into Arthur again on accident. I was appraising a collector's estate near Gainesville. A mid-century rancher with a wine cellar and 2 mini-mounted fish. Halfway through taking photos of a vintage tool chest, I heard a voice behind me. Didn't expect to see you here. I turned slowly. Arthur. Thinner. Paler. Wearing a blazer he hadn't bothered to iron, and a tie he probably hadn't tied in months. He looked like a man halfway into exile. He'd been hired by the family's cousin to assess the home's land value. Apparently, not everyone in the region had watched the video. Or maybe they just didn't care. I nodded once. Arthur. He stood awkwardly in the doorway, shifting his weight. You still mad? I shook my head. That part's over. He looked relieved, then added, almost shyly, you killed me, you know. That day. I know. I lost everything. I turned back to the tool chest. You didn't lose her. He laughed, short, bitter. No. I lost her too. She ghosted me 3 weeks later. Said it wasn't sustainable. I paused, setting my camera down. Did you expect it to be? I don't know, he said. I think I just wanted to matter to someone. She made me feel like I did. There it was. The echo of my own mistake. I, too, once mistook attention for affection. Presence for permanence. He sat down on a wooden stool nearby, rubbing his eyes. You ever think about how easily we wrecked everything? Over something that probably wouldn't have lasted. I didn't answer. Because yeah, I thought about it all the time. After that, the season quieted. Estate calls slowed. Spring melted into summer, and the heat came heavy. I spent more time in my apartment than I liked. It still smelled faintly of her perfume in the closet. Some notes just don't fade. Then came the letter. No return address. Handwritten again. Not Caroline. This time it was from my old friend Zach, a fellow auctioneer from Savannah who I hadn't spoken to in years. Saw the clip. Heard the stories. At first, I thought, damn, that's brutal. But then I thought, it's honest. I got outbid on a museum contract recently. The guy they hired? Known fraud. Slept his way into the curator's good graces. I wish I had your guts. He ended with a job offer. A co-hosting gig for a traveling auction roadshow. Filmed. Syndicated regionally. A mix of reality TV and expert appraisal. He said it had legs. Said I'd be perfect for it. We need someone who can talk straight and hammer hard. I stared at the letter for a long time. Because here it was, the next step. A ladder offered. An escape hatch. And I didn't know if I deserved it. I drove back to Greensville the next day. Not because I wanted to, but because I needed to see the crater one last time. The Hennings estate was still unsold. Arthur had listed it twice. Both buyers pulled out. The grass had overgrown, and the barn's roof sagged now like a wounded animal. For sale, as his sign leaned crooked at the edge of the gravel drive. I didn't get out of the car. I just sat there, engine idling, windows down. In the rearview mirror, I thought I saw Caroline's shape. Of course I didn't. She was gone, probably in another town, another job, another half-truth life. But the guilt remained. Not for exposing them, but for being so good at it. I accepted Zach's offer. Because the truth is, I wanted to talk again. But this time with purpose. Not from pain. Not to destroy. But to teach. To guide. To offer value that didn't come from vengeance. The show launched small. For towns. Then 8. Then a streaming platform picked it up. And soon, I was Simon Travis, the guy from the Hammer Show. A whole new reputation. People stopped asking about the auction. Mostly. But sometimes, in a quiet moment, a fan would pull me aside and say, "Hey, were you really the guy who?" And I'd smile. I was. Once. It happened on a Tuesday. A charity gala in Athens, Georgia, part of the filming tour for our new season. Zach and I had been invited as local TV talent, there to auction off celebrity dinners, spa weekends, a minor league team jersey signed by someone only the diehards cared about. I wore my good Navy suit. The one Caroline once bought me when things were still good. I hadn't worn it since the auction. The event was upscale but fake in all the ways that glitter without weight. Glossy smiles, hollow laughter, free champagne, and a string quartet playing Coldplay like it was Vivaldi. And then, across the ballroom floor, a slow, inevitable horror, I saw her. Caroline. Standing beside a new man. Older, well-dressed, holding a cocktail glass like he'd never emptied one in his life. She laughed at something he said, hand brushing his arm, smile practiced but present. She hadn't seen me yet. I could have left. I should have. Instead, I waited. Watched. And when she finally looked my way, her face dropped half an inch. Just enough for me to know she hadn't prepared for this. She approached during the silent auction break. Alone. "Simon," she said softly. "Caroline." She looked fine. Not radiant. Not ruined. Just a woman carrying the weight of her choices like a designer handbag. "I've been watching the show," she said, folding her arms. "You're good. You didn't think I would be?" "I didn't know what you'd be." We stood there in the low light of the ballroom's corner, two ghosts dressed in formal wear, pretending we hadn't blown our lives apart in front of an entire town. "I heard about Arthur," I said. She flinched, barely. "What part?" "He filed for bankruptcy last month." She nodded. "He started drinking again." I tried to help, but... "You always try," I said. "That's your favorite move. The try. Never the finish." She looked like I slapped her. "You still think I'm the villain?" "No," I said. "I think we both were." She took a deep breath. "I miss who we were. We don't exist anymore. And if we did?" I didn't answer. Because truthfully, there was a version of us, the early one, that I still mourned. Quiet coffee mornings. Antique fairs. Laughing at bad hotel art. A decade of routine that, in its best moments, felt like a well-worn book you never got tired of reading. But I couldn't go back. Not without tearing the pages out first. "I'm not angry anymore," I said. "Then what are you?" "Tired," I replied. We parted without a hug. She returned to her date. I returned to the microphone. And when I picked it up, the crowd hushed. Familiar adrenaline kicked in, the kind that made me sharp, magnetic, in command. But this time, I didn't start with a joke. I started with a truth. "Before I launch into our next item," I said, "I want to thank everyone for being here tonight. Not just because it's a good cause, but because sometimes, showing up is the hardest part. Whether you've had a hard year, or made mistakes, or are still figuring out who you are when no one's watching, thank you for being here anyway." It wasn't dramatic. No one gasped. But I saw Caroline look down. And that was enough. A week later, I was filming in a refurbished train depot outside Asheville. The air smelled like dust and pine needles, and we were cataloging antique rail tokens when Zach pulled me aside. You've been different since Athens. How so? Calmer. Like you finally buried something. I thought about that. Then nodded. I think I did. Arthur died in July. Liver failure. The obituary didn't mention that. Just passed peacefully at home. No children. No lasting accomplishments. Just the line, he is survived by his younger sister and a small dog named Copper. I read it online in a hotel room in Chattanooga. Caroline didn't attend the funeral. Neither did I. But I sent flowers. No card. Just silence. By fall, the show was picked up for a second season. More cities. Bigger budgets. Offers rolled in consulting gigs, book proposals, speaking requests. I rented a place on a lake north of Atlanta. Small dock. No neighbors. A place built for reflection. I started painting again. Badly. But it felt like something I hadn't had in a long time. Freedom without noise. Caroline emailed me once more. Late September. No subject line. Just a paragraph. You were the one person who never tried to fix me because you thought I didn't need fixing. I took advantage of that. I wanted to be more, and I became less. I'm sorry for all of it, not because of what it cost me, but because of what it did to you. You didn't deserve that. If I could go back, I would choose you. Every time. See, I read it twice, then archived it. No reply. Some apologies are meant to echo, not end. People ask me, sometimes, if I regret what I did. If I'd go back and handle it better. If I'd speak softer. Act kinder. And my answer is always the same. No. Because in a world full of half-truths and hushed betrayals, I did the one thing that mattered. I spoke. Loud enough for everyone to hear. Sold to the silence. And this time, I walked away.